Hello everyone, it's Daniel Orion from Mannschaft Forever. I'm going to give a quick little prediction and overview of Group F in the World Cup that's just a couple days away. The group consists of world champions Germany, along with Mexico, Sweden, and South Korea. This is the only group I'm going to go over because this channel is really just about Germany. There's many other YouTubers who have done previews and predictions of all of the other groups who I'm sure will do a better job than me. I try to research Germany well, and Mexico is actually my country by heritage. I was born here in the United States, but I follow Mexico. So I actually know more about this group, I would say, than any other group for sure. And one thing that stands out just a few days away from the World Cup is how poorly all four of these countries have performed in the last friendlies. We take a look at Germany, who smashed the World Cup qualifications. They have a tie 0-0 with England, 2-2 against France. They tied 1-1 against Spain. They lost 1-0 against Brazil. They lost 2-1 against Austria, and they barely beat Saudi Arabia 2-1. Mexico also doesn't have a very impressive record, aside from beating Iceland 3-0, which was, if anyone watched that game, it doesn't really represent it too accurately. Iceland had a few chances, and Mexico had at least one or two lucky goals there. Despite Mexico being the better team, I don't think it should have ended 3-0. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In the 6 last friendlies, they've scored 4 goals. 3 of those were against Iceland. 1 against Bosnia and Herzegovina, 1 against Scotland. They tied 0-0 against Wales, and they were recently defeated 2-0 by Denmark. They also fell 1-0 against Croatia. Sweden hasn't had as many friendly games. They've also tied 0-0 against Denmark and Peru. They lost 1-0 against Romania, and they lost 2-1 against Chile. South Korea has had a lot of friendlies. Most notably, Poland was one of the stronger teams they've played against. It ended 3-2. It was 2-0 for most of the game. South Korea scored 2 near the end of it, and then Poland got the last-minute winning goal. Senegal, I would say, is the other strong country they faced very recently, about a day or two ago, and it ended 2-0 in Senegal's favor. Other games have included lesser-known teams like Jamaica, Latvia, Northern Ireland, Bolivia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and South Korea has not looked too strong against these. They tied 0-0 against Jamaica. Northern Ireland defeated them 2-1. Bosnia and Herzegovina beat them 3-1, which is the same team that Mexico beat 1-0. So it doesn't look too promising, actually, for any of these 4. But I think the same goes for all of these 4, that these performances don't represent their potential and how strong they're going to look once this starts. I know Mexico is a team that historically performs pretty poorly leading up to the World Cup, and then once they get there, once it starts mattering, they perform pretty well. Germany had a similar situation in the last World Cup as well, and they ended up winning that World Cup, because boy do the Germans know how to win when it matters. The first and one of the most important matches, maybe not one of the most important, but it's probably the number one match you want to watch, the Germany versus Mexico match, the first one from this group. If Mexico does not beat Germany, it's not the biggest deal because Germany is the favorite to win this group, and really, this is one of the groups where it's a harsh fight for second place here, assuming nothing goes wrong, which Germany being one of the most consistent teams in football history, I don't think anything will go wrong. But Mexico is the team I believe will get out of this group alongside Germany in second place. I think Mexico has more of a history, of succeeding at least past the group stages of the World Cup. They've done it for the last 6 World Cups, if I'm not mistaken, and Sweden has failed to qualify for most, if not all, of the last 6 World Cups. Let me just talk briefly about the Germany versus Mexico game before I move on to Sweden. There's two different philosophies that people take when analyzing what will happen in this game. One of them is they look at how Mexico performs against the important teams historically. Like, for example, they held Brazil to a 0-0 draw in the last World Cup, which was a huge surprise. Brazil was the home team. They were the favorites. So that was pretty incredible. And so people are using that to say, hey, well, Mexico really steps up when it comes to facing these teams that are considered world class, that can feasibly win the World Cup. And that's kind of true, but I think Germany might be the exception here. And I think just Germany's strength combined with Mexico's weakness is just like fire and oil, because Mexico has a strong team. They just don't, right now, I think they have less cohesion than they did 4 years ago, just because of the coach Juan Carlos Osorio. He doesn't settle on lineups. That's a big criticism. And so he makes a lot of changes, and as a result, the players don't get to know each other as well, because they always have someone different lined up next to them. And that has hurt them a lot. I think that me and a lot of other people think that's what leads to the defeats they've suffered, like the 4-1 defeat by Germany in the Confederations Cup, and the famous 7-0 defeat handed to them by Chile. Because I think the lineups they had in those matches were quite strong, but it's just the mistakes they made due to not being familiarized with the players next to them. That's what I really think did it for them. And now, Germany, I think the strongest trait of this team, and it always has been, is, first of all, their teamwork, how well they know each other, as opposed to Mexico, but more so, it's how consistently they can punish mistakes of the opposition. I don't think the 7-1 defeat they handed Brazil was accurate of how much of a superior team they had. I think if any other team had been matched up against Brazil, they would not have successfully punished every single mistake that Brazil was making with the same consistency that Germany was doing. They have this system where they just slip past you, they force you to try and panic cover the guy in front of the goal, and he just passes it to the guy behind him and slots it in easily. So they just defeat so many opponents preying on their mistakes, and I feel like Mexico is very vulnerable to that style of play. Moving on, Sweden versus Mexico, I think this is going to be the battle that's going to decide who takes second place. I think Mexico can do it. I think they have a better chance. Sweden is less experienced historically, but also Sweden has a style of play that is going to give Mexico a hard time. They don't concede many goals. That's how they knocked out Italy to qualify for the World Cup. And Mexico is going to need a little bit of luck to penetrate their 4-4-2 lineup that really gives problems to a lot of teams despite having a good offense like France and the Netherlands. So I really think that's going to be the match to watch. Now, Germany, I think, can disassemble Sweden's defense with its traditional 4-2-3-1 formation. Just control in the midfield until they find an opening, and that game's going to end like 1-0 or something. And then South Korea, I feel like South Korea does not have a good chance of beating Sweden, which is not where you want to be in this group. I think Sweden's defensive skills will line up pretty well against what South Korea has to offer. They might get a goal against Germany, the Koreans, but also defensively they're lackluster, so that game, getting a goal might just mean the match ends up, I don't know, 6-1 or something like that. And against Mexico, I think their styles are pretty similar, but I think Mexico's a bit superior enough to end the game 3-2 or something like that. Yeah, I think the last friendlies really have not represented what these countries can do. I could talk more about what happened with all of those ties and losses that Germany had. That still surprised even me, but I think for all of these nations it looks worse than it actually is. So that's what we might be seeing, in my opinion, in a few days for this group. I think Germany and Mexico are going to make it out, but Sweden also has a chance there, a pretty good one.